Hi Dara, this is Kenzie. I am on YouTube. This is really weird. I am usually behind the camera, so I feel a little awkward, but it's okay. So just bear with me while I stumble my way through this. My name is Kenzie, and I am the other half of Dead Men Don't podcast. It's a show that focuses on supernatural and the history behind supernatural experiences in Canada. We mostly focus on Toronto, but we hope to branch out later, and we kind of mix it in a little bit with a little bit of folklore, which you can tell from Adara's last video. That's what she really loves, and I love it too. But yeah, we kind of mix it together to kind of mash our interests together, you know. If you haven't seen Adara's video yet, there is a link down in the description so you can go watch it. She talks a little bit about Gothic Spring and a little intro into what we're doing here and how we've kind of not essentially moved from the podcast platform, but we're kind of adding some supplementary material that will keep everyone engaged while Adara and I are, you know, apart. Anyway, Adara, I have a story for you. You can probably guess what the story is going to be about because you know my interests, and I'm sure whoever else is watching also knows my interests. Of course, she's interested in this stuff too, but you know, I'm a little bit more into it. So our story begins in New Brunswick. I know we have quite a few American listeners. We actually have more American listeners than Canadian listeners on this podcast. So I thought I'd show you just about right here where New Brunswick is. It's a very small province on the coast of the Atlantic Ocean. It's a beautiful province, I must say. I have been there once in my life, but it also has a story that still scares some of its residents to this day. I am talking about the Dungarvon Whooper. It's spelled W-H-O-O-P-R, but it's pronounced Hooper. I thought it was Whooper, but it's not. You probably haven't heard of this. I hadn't heard of it until a few days ago when I was actually researching it, but that's okay. We're gonna learn. The tale of the Dungarvon Whooper begins in the early 19th century in the Miramichi area of New Brunswick. This story doesn't really have an official origin story, but the closest that you can get to it is from a poem that Michael Welland wrote in the early 20th century. Deep in the woods near the Dungarvon River was a logging camp, and there was a bunch of lumberjacks that were in a group at this camp. And one of the lumberjacks' name was Ryan Gavin. And while he was a lumberjack, he was also the camp cook. So he cooked all the food for all the other lumberjacks at this camp. Ryan was pretty well off for a logger back then. He saved a lot of his income and he kept it in a little money belt at his waist. Why you would bring a pouch full of money into the deep woods, I don't really understand, but that's how the story goes. So we're just gonna go with it. One day, all of the lumberjacks left the camp for the day to go logging, and the only two left at the camp was Ryan and the camp boss, which unfortunately set the scene for a really terrible event to take place. When the lumberjacks returned from their logging venture, they saw a really horrible sight. They looked down, and Ryan, the camp cook, is laying on the ground dead. Now they turn to the boss and they're like, what happened? Like, what's going on here? And the boss says, he just fell down dead. He got ill. He took ill very quickly and he just fell down dead. There was nothing I could do to help him. Now, the lumberjacks were very suspicious of this claim because, you know, even though he was dead on the floor, his money belt was missing. But obviously they didn't question the boss because he was the boss and he was in charge of their paycheck. So they were just like, okay, awful. I guess we're gonna have to set up a funeral for him. A snowstorm came in with really heavy winds. It blanketed the whole area with about 4 feet of snow. Now this lumberjack party trudged through the forest and dug a shallow grave for the poor young cook. And they put him in the grave and then they left to head back to camp. As they headed back to camp, they started hearing a really unusual and unnerving noise. Over the howling wind, they heard a terrible whooping sound, the terrible, awful sound of a man screaming for his life. The sounds surrounded them from all sides and followed them back to camp. They heard it all night and all into the next day until they were driven crazy with this sound. For years, you could hear the haunting shrieks of this poor camp cook that met a terrible end, and you would hear it just around the area where the shallow grave was dug and he was laid in. Now I have a little section from Welland's poem that states this and describes this a little bit better than I did. So here it goes. I'm going to read it because I did not have it memorized. So let's do this here. Since that day, so goes the word. Fearful sounds have long been heard. Far round the scene where lies the woodman's grave, whoops the stoutest hearts to thrill, yells that warmest blood to chill, sends terror to the bravest of the brave. It's a good poem. I will link it down in this description so you can read the whole thing. It's pretty creepy, but it was also a really great source for me when I was writing the script for this episode, which I'm not really using that much. One day, after years and years of this haunting event occurring, a priest named Father Murdoch was called to perform an exorcism. So what he did is he went to the shallow grave of the man years later and performed an exorcism, reading excerpts from the Bible, things like that. The priest declared that the young cook was now at rest. And a lot of people said, okay, so he did the exorcism. Now everything's fine. Everything is back to normal. We're no longer hearing the haunting cries of this young cook. And this young cook is now at rest. He's not here anymore. However, to this day, some of the residents in New Brunswick still believe and still hear this whooping sound. The Dungarvon Whooper is known as New Brunswick's most famous ghost. There's actually a statue of him carved out of wood in the village of Blackville. This event, this spirit, was actually featured on Canada Post's collection of Haunted Canada stamps in 2016. So now that I know this collection exists, I want every single stamp out there, but I don't know how to get it. So now it's driving me crazy, but it's fine. Anyway, that is the end of my tale, Adara. I'm very happy that we're able to bring this kind of content to our listeners and any new listeners that have come to watch our videos and want to listen to old episodes of the podcast. We have over 30 now, so you guys can go back and listen to those. We hope to bring out the longer episodes after this quarantine is over and we're actually able to go out and interview the people and go to these places again. So I'm really glad that we were able to bring this kind of short little story to you guys. I hope you enjoyed my ghostly tale, and I'll see you, Adara, next week. Kenzie out. The Dungarvon Whooper is known as New Brunswick's most famous ghost. There's actually... That's the sound of my dog shaking back and forth. Over the howling... Can I say howling? Howling. That night, a snorestorm. Snore. I hope this isn't a snorestorm. This story doesn't have an official origin story. There's another loud car. There's a lot of loud cars, guys. Like, just going past. But it's fine. It's only my first video. It's okay.